and we'll go.
Broadcasting from the beautiful Hill Country in Texas, this is OneRadioNetwork.com.
Well, a very pleasant good afternoon to you. We're live here. It is the 27th of July. You can join the show via email or 888-663-6386. A little bit late this morning. Well, it kind of got messed up. I screwed up again. I don't know. I need a secretary. But Jim Rogers, legendary investor out of Singapore, he's going to be here tomorrow morning a little bit early because the 13-hour time difference for Singapore. Jim Rogers, tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. We'll be talking gold, oil, silver, gas, Russia, China, like we're going to talk today, Ukraine, and stock market and inflation, the Fed and the dollar. Really a good man. He's been at this for a long time. Jim Rogers, tomorrow, 9 o'clock Central, live from Singapore. And that'll be tomorrow right here on One Radio Network. Right now, we're going to spend a few minutes with a friend, and we haven't met personally, but we've had quite a few shows with Matthew Arrett. He's a great researcher, a journalist out of Canada. He has more websites than allowed by law. I think he holds the record. Rising Tide Foundation, CanadianPatriot.org, StrategicCulture.org, and he's got a Substack. I want to get one of those Substacks, but you know what? I'm so brain dead on geeky stuff, Matthew. I don't even know what a Substack is. What is a Substack, Matthew? And good afternoon. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, good afternoon, Patrick. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And yeah, you should get a Substack for sure. What it is, it's a newsletter. That's all it is. It's a website, and it has a bit of a website feel to it, but it's a way for you to just directly send out messages, whether it's your videos or your writings, and it gives people the option to either subscribe for free or to upgrade and pay a monthly, $4 or $5 a month to support you. And get maybe premium content, but it's been a lifeline for Cynthia and myself, especially since our PayPals and other things were shut down by Big Brother. It's provided a very, very important and useful way to pay the bills. So get a Substack.
I should do that. I'm the worst marketer ever. I shouldn't say that out loud, but Matthew, I just do it and just give it to God, and hopefully we pay the bills. But I understand you guys who are out there in the trenches doing this kind of research, you got to figure out a way how to make a living, right? I mean, you just got to. Otherwise, you got to, go to work. Go to work somewhere else and not do the research, right?
Well, the first time I got a paid gig, because it is, you have to really think outside of the box. This is not a conventional line of work. And I'd spent some years just writing for free because, the ideas you have, if you have ideas that you feel are important and should be shared, you want to work on your craft. And for a long time, I was just doing things for free out of, and I found myself working at a miserable job 9 to 5 that I was really starting to despise at a university, some administrative stuff in a very fascist university. And everybody there was really part of an eco-fascist cult of liberalism. And there were a couple of people who could talk politics. And when I'd meet them in the hallway, we'd start whispering, because if you get heard, you could be, sent to a committee. You could be reported upon by a student who might be offended. So it's a very, very, tyrannical environment, as a lot of people have experienced. And I just wasn't adapting to it very well at a certain point. and I got called in to the head office, to HR, and they basically said, we're not going to renew your contract. You're not really fitting in well. And I was like, shit, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills now. And I got back to my computer, and I got a message from Strategic Culture Foundation, which is a Russian news magazine. And they offered to pay. And that was the first time I had ever received somebody who was willing to actually pay money for some writings. So I saw that as a bit serendipitous, that was like the universe knocking at my door saying, you have to really just put your energy now into this basket entirely and just branch out. So that's what I did. And it's been
Matthew,
working out.
When I Googled you this morning, which I just did just to see what all the different things that you're involved in, it said that you still work for American University in Moscow, or what is that?
Yeah, well, that's a Washington, Moscow think tank. That's run by a friend named Dr. Edward Lazansky. He's a nuclear physicist and an expat from the a defector in the 1980s who left the Soviet Union and became sort of a freedom, human rights champion, and really an anti-war activist. And he had been building it, especially since the late 90s. He had been using what was originally planned to be an actual university in Moscow in the early 90s that he'd been building towards. He had a lot of people in the U.S. government who was trying to help create sort of a university in Moscow to help so-called Westernize. But there was a battle at the time between different ideologies of what that Westernization process was going to look like, whether it was going to be the way I think Reagan kind of wanted, which was, okay, the Soviet Union is collapsing. Now we can help build a real industrial capitalist economy based upon real development. And there was promises for like $100 billion of Western investments to help really uplift, the Russian economy, invest in massive infrastructure, and use that as a springboard for a sort of an economic renaissance internationally, which was a very positive idea. But then, of course, when we actually saw George Bush Sr. and then Bill Clinton come in, there was a very different idea of just subjugating and destroying Russia and creating a new oligarchical class by privatizing everything and expanding NATO. So the planned American university that Dr. Lazansky was supposed to head did not pan out. It was not funded, even though the government building was provided and pledges were made, but it was never followed through. So since then, it's been sort of a platform to initiate conferences for East-West dialogue, which it's been doing for 25 years. And they offer certification courses as well on physics and political science. So
we want to talk. I read an article you wrote about Russia and the China and the Silk Road thing, and I wanted to help people understand what the heck is going on. So what's the fellow's name in China? Is it Xi? Is that how you would say his name? Xi?
Indeed.
Xi and Vladimir, they get together and have coffee. What are they talking about, Matthew Arrett? What are they, or probably wine or vodka or what are they talking about today?
Well, I think that they're planning, as Putin has said, revolutionary changes are going to be brought about very shortly, bigger than people realize. And he's not talking about the Great Reset. He was talking about the collapse of the entire transhumanist neoliberal sort of unipolar order. And he said it in pretty much those terms.
Wow.
Maybe not transhumanist, but unipolar order. He did definitely take aim at, and for the right reasons. I think that the leadership of Eurasia have been looking at this oncoming collapse of the Western system for a very long time and trying at their best to set into motion a framework that would allow for the creation of a new and viable system once that collapse does hit, which would not be under the control of the Anglo-American, psychopaths trying to manage a global one-world government.
Wow.
So I think that their talk is generally probably vectored around things that pertain to dirty economic alternatives.
So if we were in a stadium and we needed to take sides because we had too many beers, would we be rooting for Russia and China versus Klaus? I mean, is it that simple, or would we? Klaus Schwab?
In simple terms, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. I mean, there's fifth columns in both of those countries. Like they got their own battles to continuously fight to extract their own deep states. But they do have a very, very strong battle, and the difference between our nationalist movements here in the West versus their nationalist movements is that their nationalists have done a much better job at extracting the agents that have been embedded throughout their governments, whereas we have done a much worse job. And here the nationalists have really fallen to the wayside.
They're swampy, where the United States swampy has begun getting a little swampier with the CIA and the FBI and everything going on.
Their draining has been much more effective than our draining.
I see. So I guess all countries have their own swamp, right? They got their own swamp.
Oh, yeah. I don't know of a country that doesn't have some form of swampiness. But, That's part of history. And the oligarchy doesn't know national boundaries. It's supranational, and it operates above nations and has worked to penetrate as in full spectrum fashion, right? Whether it's the cultural policymakers, the military, the financial side of things, they just penetrate. And in the case of Russia, without, they had their own penetrations throughout the Cold War. And it really got bad in the 90s when there was a full-blown amplification of these, transhumanist technocrats who created a new type of structure of controls, which Dick Cheney himself said that he wanted to wipe out Russia, not the Soviet Union, but Russia as a civilizational force in the 90s. His colleagues had written about how they were disturbed listening to Dick Cheney talking about the desire to break up and undo Russia's existence. Wow. And that's what Yeltsin was all about. That's why Yeltsin was put in power, was to do the job, which is also, I think, why he turned into a mess of a drunk. Because it's, as a corrupt person, it's still, you don't want to be the guy presiding over the destruction of your civilization. But that was his assignment, and he didn't handle it well. And I think luckily you had a remix around a fellow named Primakov, who was a patriot, a great man in Russia, who was prime minister at the time and a major influencer over Russian intelligence, who managed to get somebody he saw as very competent to basically be a troubleshooter, Putin, which has been now a 23-year battle that Putin has waged against this cancer. And sometimes he often has little victories. Sometimes he has defeats. But there's been a general trend in Russia that we could map out from 1999 to the present, featuring an extraction and reduction of the power of that evil thing, that swamp that had grown in the 90s. That's been reduced in influence, especially since the developments in Ukraine in February. There's been a hyper reduction of their influence, as many of those oligarchs, like Anatoly Chubai, he's the guy who brought in the World Economic Forum, the Davos logic into Russia in the 90s. He was one of the key founding fathers of perestroika. He recently escaped Russia to avoid, I don't know what he thought he was going to avoid, but it was going to be something he was very afraid of. And he basically went to his mansion in Turkey, where he's now living, and gave up all of his, government jobs that he was still holding on to. Many others have followed suit with him. So that's good. That's a good thing. China has a similar trend. You could talk about the same experience China has had.
Yeah. So it looks like the big thing with China and Russia would be the whole BRICS thing and being able to work around it being taken away from SWIFT, and now talking of a new currency, right? So the whole monetary thing is a huge deal with Russia, China, right? And BRICS, and maybe Saudi Arabia now. There's rumors that, Saudi Arabia is going to join these dudes. Do you think that's going to happen?
It might. Saudi Arabia has been a trophy, a high-priced trophy for the multipolar alliance for some time. And I think Saudi Arabia has sort of seen the writing on the wall, as has Turkey increasingly. They've been useful at providing the support for a geopolitical strategy that really got underway in the late 70s under Zbigniew Brzezinski's helm under Carter, which I think everyone is familiar with to some extent. Operation Cyclone, the utilization of radical jihadis, radicalization of Islam, with Wahhabite, madrasas and things of that sort that would be sponsored by the CIA with help by Wahhabite networks that were part of Anglo-American intelligence in the Gulf states, especially. Saudi Arabia was designed to play a key role in facilitating the radicalization of big swaths of the Muslim population as part of this strategy, originally to suck in Russia in the 80s and undermine Russia that way, which is Zbigniew called the greatest success of his career. When he was asked, was it worth it? Now we have, millions and millions of terrorists around the world because of the strategy you created. Was it worth it? And he said, of course it was worth it. He hates Russia that much. And so, Saudi Arabia was part of the tool basket. But I think in the grand scheme of the type of New World Order agenda, they were promised, certain managerial influential roles that they were told that they would be allowed to play in the Middle East. and big swaths of Africa in that new post-nation state system. And I think that they've come to terms with the very real fact that ultimately they're much more disposable and not as essential as they thought they were, or as that they were told that they were. And same thing for Turkey with their, greater Turkish imperial Ottoman Empire ideology. That was also not very stable. And Erdogan got a taste of that when there was a CIA-sponsored coup d'etat in 2016, which would have seen him deposed, probably killed by the what are called the Fethullah Gulen networks.
Wow.
Fethullah Gulen's a cult leader who's was exiled from Turkey back in 2001. He's living in the United States in a big compound protected by the U.S. By the State Department. And he's got a massive network of Fabian society modeled. It's kind of like a Freemasonic type of network embedded in the military and academia and intelligence and media in Turkey that were all activated at the same time. And Russian intelligence got some intel to Erdogan like 30 minutes before the thing was going to go down.
Whoa. And
it gave him just the amount of wiggle room needed to get onto a helicopter, get into a safe space, and see the thing through. So he's alive now because specifically of Russia. I think Saudi Arabia as well. They could see that under the COP27, this whole decarbonization program, that anybody who has made their influence or their money off of petrochemicals will have no real role to play in the deindustrial anti-carbon society that is supposed to be brought online. So where does that leave Saudi Arabia or other Gulf states whose entire economy is based upon oil and natural gas? So I think that they have been offered something which is much more attractive to their actual self-interest by Russia and China, both of whom are investing massively in helping Saudi Arabia make the leap into nuclear power, as with the UAE as well. There's Bahrain, Oman are looking at the same sort of orientation. Qatar is still playing a bit of a dual game. But Qatar is also quite friendly with, well, actually, you know what? Here's the thing. All of these countries all of the Gulf states have been sort of set as enemies to Iran, who is a major, power broker in the entire Southwest Asian zone. They've all been building their diplomatic bridges over the past 12 to 24 months with Iran. So they've reactivated embassies that had formerly been shut down in 2015-16. That's being reactivated. You have economic agreements to build rail. That's the new big thing right now that China is really pushing on, because it integrates the Belt and Road Initiative into southern corridors throughout Southwest Asia. And there's all sorts of different corridors being opened up that don't just bring rail, but it also brings industrial corridors, because where you have a new rail initiative, you also have new opportunities for building new industries, special economic zones, new energy corridors that are all being built along the rail systems. And with also trans-border rail connections, you have greater chances for finding friendships which couldn't exist when you had nations divided and better conquered. They're more easy to be set at each other's throats when you keep people divided from each other. Sure. And that's the beauty of the BRI approach versus the West. Same thing for Africa. Yeah. So Saudi Arabia might very much, they certainly want to be a part of things like the BRICS right now, and they are moving towards it fast. Yeah.
So China and Russia, can we say, has a big picture that doesn't include the EU or the United States economically?
Well, look, when you look at the way that China has organized their economic activity over the past 8 years, especially, there's been a constant, up until very recently, where it's become obvious that the West is currently under the control of something that is not able to negotiate with sanity. But they've always had an open door policy, and they've always tried to speak to the better part of the West to say, let's work together. Why are we going to war? Why are we saber rattling when we could be making billions of dollars together, building things together at the same time and benefiting all sides? Wow. So they always have had this open policy to work together. And I think they still do. They would rather that happen. But right now, all we're seeing coming out of the West are, attempts to, on the one hand, militarily provoke and encircle both Russia and China, which is part of what's pulling us down the path to a danger of nuclear war. And, they're trying to bribe as many countries in Africa and Asia, or bribe and threaten them into rejecting BRI friendly projects and instead going along with stupid, idiotic projects like the gateway, the Green Belt Gateway Partnership, which is this, EU US version, an anti-BRI mega project, which has no ability to finance itself. It's supposed to be $300 billion of investments into green infrastructure for Africa and Asia. So there's no way to actually finance this. All of these countries are bankrupt, and the countries that are supposed to be receiving this, they kind of know that, well, if they just have windmills or solar panels that they're building,
they're not going to survive.
They're not going to survive. You can't sustain heavy industry with any of these things. You're going to be subdued to nothing. So it's not very attractive.
It almost feels like, I guess I could get too judgmental, but that the people that are doing the Klaus Schwab and the New World Order folks and the rest of it, in that video I sent you, this other group, Rothschild, that they don't know what they're doing, do they? I mean, it seems like they're just really dysfunctional. Are they? Is that fair or unfair?
Yeah, there's I think there's a certain laziness of thinking in the oligarchical managerial culture, because of having had too many decades of success. I think that there's a certain arrogance that has been built up. And if you compare, like, for example, look at Henry Kissinger, right? Here's a guy, he's 99 years old. His whole life's legacy is feasibly going to go up in smoke in a nuclear war. I think that Henry Kissinger legitimately he never wanted a nuclear war. His religion was a religion of stasis, so-called equilibrium, which is where he worships, is the god of stasis. And that's what he calls natural, sustainable, as do many of these Malthusians that he was, a leading figure of when he was most useful in the late 60s, 70s. He is today a voice of sanity in the West, because
Henry Kissinger, a voice of sanity.
Yeah, at the World Economic Forum, he came out saying, look, we overstepped, we overplayed our hand, and we've misstepped too many times now, and Ukraine has to accept now pulling back and accepting a bit of defeat, maybe losing some territory. He said a few things on those lines, and I think part of that is just that he, unlike the younger generation of technocrats, he actually has a living memory of a world where there was still a much more serious fight that he was a part of, where you had to be more creative and more flexible and acknowledge a greater spectrum of reality that you were interfacing with. Whereas the younger people, the Ursula von der Leyens, the World Economic Forum young leader graduates since the early 90s that are now in positions of authority in the corporate as well as public sectors, they're people with no living experience managing anything during a time that wasn't the post-Soviet, post-Cold War age. It's a fictitious age where, from 1991, it was the end of history. The New World Order was here, and it's now just a matter of consolidating the power for the past 30 years. And they've just been living in that cultish mindset. They don't know how to think. They don't know how to look at reality as it is. Whereas older generations like Kissinger are able to still do that. They're pragmatic in that sense. It doesn't mean that he's good. It's not like he's saying we got to go along with them. He's simply saying live the fight another day, subvert it from within. Think, shift your strategy, and maybe we could get close to them, say nice things about China and Russia. Maybe we could, and that's what Tony Blair also was sort of beginning to touch on in a recent speech that he gave, is simply saying, look, the Eurasian, the geopolitical center of gravity has shifted to Eurasia. We have to accept that. Now, he's not saying we have to work with that. He's saying that ultimately we still have to subvert it from within, but we have to not keep on the same formula we've been operating on for the past 3 decades. You got to shift it. So there's a fight, but I think the majority of those currently running, as you pointed out, the Western system they've gotten very stupid. And you could just see it by look at what they say and what they do. They're just in an ivory tower view of the way they think reality is, and it has no bearing on the actual reality that we face, that we're living in.
And look what's happening in Ukraine. They keep sending billions over there and weapons now, and it's like, I don't know. Do they really think they're going to they're going to push Putin back to Russia. He's not going to go back, is he? He's going to keep going. Looks like.
Oh yeah, yeah, most certainly. It's like this. Yeah, the Ukrainians are totally disposable cannon fodder, and many of the most radical useful idiots in Ukraine have no idea how disposable they are. You know, like Zelensky's doing Vogue photo shoots with his wife. They're so detached from reality. They're drug dealers always make the point: you don't use your drugs, right? You don't consume your own product. Yeah. These guys have actually started consuming their own. The drug today is the drug of lies and perception. That's why Putin calls it the empire of lies. And they've when you start believing the lies that you originally are launching and creating for your target victims, but now you start believing them, you're screwed. You're done for. And they're totally living into that.
But look at
Boris Johnson too. Boris Johnson was sent to the front lines in Ukraine, right, with his idiot helmet on, learning how to like shoot a gun and throw a grenade with other, it's a joke. Like they were really like into this imagery stuff.
But I still don't understand the motive, Matthew Arad, of why they keep this Ukraine thing going the way they're going, knowing that they're going to lose. Because are they just so egotistical that they can't back out and say we were wrong, or what do you think?
They're incapable of negotiating. Yeah, they're incapable right now. At least those who are shaping Western policy of self-criticism and negotiating with actual human beings. They don't have that type of basic mature human infrastructure in their soul that would allow them to have that.
That's scary.
So I think currently,
when you think about it, right, that's pretty scary.
Yes, it is. It's jarring, and also, but it should give one a little bit of hope, because I think sometimes we give the oligarchies, managers, too much credit because they have a lot of power. They've done a lot of damage, making our fellow citizens dumber and dumber over the past decades. They've done a lot of evil in this world, killing a lot of good people, overthrowing a lot of governments, creating a lot of injustice. And so it intimidates and demoralizes a lot of people, because we tend to think, oh, they must have the power of the gods to do all of that and to keep it secret. And it's like, well, they have a lot of power in one way, but in another way, they don't have any sustainability factor. Like they can't sustain their own existence because of their own wiring. And it's like that when you look at, that's why I like history so much, is it gives me case studies. I want to know, what is the nature of this beast? Because maybe, here's the theory. Okay. Maybe they have real secret knowledge known only to the inner elites. Maybe that they have special knowledge that we don't have access to. And that's what motivates them to do what they do. And maybe it's superior than us, and we don't understand why it's necessary to do evil. A lot of people think that, and sometimes it's attractive to entertain that hypothesis. But then if you look at every single time in world history that this oligarchy, which has been around for a long time, has achieved their ultimate goals of consolidating their power into a unipolar sort of small executive, and they've destroyed their opposition, which is most of the world's population, most of their target victims' ability to defend themselves, they destroy themselves too. So it's really a parasite that just moves geographically from one place to another. And every time it finds a new host, it can do not but destroy the host. And then the parasite doesn't do well. They kind of go into their own crisis. The oligarchy goes through these phases where they, when they go into such crises, like they did in the 13th or 14th century Little Dark Age, which saw a massive collapse of population levels in Europe, or earlier, the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. What you see is massive infighting within the oligarchy's inner circles. Some families have their throats slit and are thrown into the lagoons. Other new blood come in that have a little bit more of a cutthroat creative edge, and they take control of a certain fondi, a family fund that maintains continuity over many generations. But yeah, you got a lot of infighting. They coordinate. Oligarchs will tend to cohere themselves into a conspiracy of it's a handful of families that go back a few thousand years, by all evidence that I'm looking at, and they'll collaborate to the degree that it's no longer expedient, and that collaboration will end as soon as opportunities for getting internal advantage are gotten, or they create a crisis for themselves by destroying like a post.
Yeah. I think that's what Tom is asking. Thanks for having Matthew back on. I always enjoy it when he comes on. So I'd like to know, who is Klaus Schwab's boss? So, you know, you were getting to that. I mean, he has, this has been going on a long time. The forces that even created the World Economic Forum and this other thing that the Council on Inclusive Capitalism, I sent you that video with the Rothschild people. Who are the people that are pushing Klaus around, telling him what to do? Are these the people you're talking about, Freemason types or whatever? They've been around 300, 400, 500, 600 years. This whole crowd, energy, family.
Yeah, I mean, look, I recently did a piece for Whitney Webb's Unlimited Hangout that people can read in February, and it goes through the Rhodes Scholarship and Bilderberger institutions as sort of the creators of the World Economic Forum and the Young Leaders Forum as junior branches of the older Bilderberger group and, you know, roundtable scholar operations that were set into, well, the Rhodes Scholar operation was set into motion in 1902, along with a think tank called the Roundtable, which, you know, became in the United States the Council on Foreign Relations as the British branch of Chatham House, 1921. You know, both Chatham House, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, which was what the Roundtable created under, you know, in 1919, was designed to fulfill the thesis or the manifesto put forth by Cecil Rhodes in his, I think it's his first will in 1877, which sort of is the constitution for this new epoch in British imperial affairs to reconquer the United States, you know, create a new global government is what he calls for, a new religion of the British Empire, and a variety of other things that are pretty nasty. And so that itself, I mean, Cecil Rhodes was a genocidal psychopath who made it a lot of money raping Africa and creating things like De Beers, you know, which is still a major exploiter of Africa to this very day.
Yeah, the Diamond Company.
Diamond Company, yeah.
Kind of froze you up a bit.
And he worked with a bunch of Milner's kindergarten. Lord Milner, Alfred Milner, was a key figure in that one, working closely with Rhodes. Sorry, it's telling me my internet is unstable. Do you still hear me or see me well?
I can see you. You froze up for a minute, but you're fine. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah. So this was not it's not like this was, some people say it's a Cecil Rhodes conspiracy that used his fortune after he died to create and put online these international think tanks and Rhodes scholarship programs to brainwash young talent, to create a new army of technocrats that would have this religion of population control, religion of Hobbesian unipolarism that would animate their hearts and minds. It wasn't really a Cecil Rhodes conspiracy. He was a useful tool. But above him, a lot of the money came from some of these older black nobility families of Europe. People like, you know, I mean, the Rothschild banks were a big backer in putting this into motion, as were some older families too. Because keep in mind, even the Rothschilds are still sort of a newer family. It's a newer mercenary family brought online in the mid 18th century. I mean, this oligarchical satanic parasite goes far before the Rothschilds here.
Way back.
So way back, yeah. I mean, they use some of these mercenary families that exhibit skill sets, and they, you know, if you do a good job on behalf of your masters throughout, you know, over enough decades, you can be rewarded with minor or higher degrees of family privileges such that your children, your grandkids will be rewarded a certain dynastic set of privileges that they will inherit. But they're all still tools of a certain control center, a mechanism that can ultimately dispose of them if you have, let's say, a renegade son or two, as I think we saw with the Kennedys. you can ultimately dispose of the dynasty, revoke the privileges, and we've seen examples of that historically now and again.
And Matthew, they can do this because of the intertwined financial thing with banking and World Bank, Vatican, Big Pharma, Big Agri, all kind of together like a giant squid and into politics. They just have a lot of their fingers in a lot of different areas, right? And that's how
they'll corrupt anything that they can touch.
That's how they do it.
Whether it's and you'll find, I think that approaching it, trying to piece this together using a bottom-up approach of like peeling back the onion layers is sort of exhausting, and usually there's a lot of traps along the way to give you at a certain point a false direction. Decoys are set up, like, and by decoy I mean false models are created to move the mind of an open-minded thinker into zanier and zanier directions to try to get them away from a causal nexus, which is ultimately very easily visible from the top down. If you look at world history from the top as your primary point, you could sort of see it a little bit more in terms of, well, what's the common denominator of this oligarchical modality? And there are certain constants which deal with we'll actually put that on pause. That's actually a whole, I realize it's a can of worms I'm opening up, but there are universal common denominators that are always available to the mind to see very clearly and simply. And it's ultimately a much more there's points of Achilles heels, points of weaknesses within that structure of controls, which great people, whether it's St. Augustine or earlier Cicero or Plato before that, and Socrates, or afterwards, people like Thomas More, Erasmus of Rotterdam, were capitalizing on that would, with relatively minimal energy input, they would be able to take down big structures of oligarchical control, because there is a certain foundation of sand in this thing, which is why they can't even sustain their own existence for very long after they succeed, like I said, in achieving what they want. But back to your original question on Klaus Schwab, or the Tom, I guess Tom was his name, right? Asking. Klaus Schwab himself, if it wasn't him, it would be somebody else. He's not a creator of anything. He himself was a student who had a certain talent that was discovered by Henry Kissinger at Harvard. His family connections also with Nazi high intelligence and are available. That's questionable. But he himself was used, he was trained by Kissinger at Harvard in '66 in a CIA-sponsored program. They saw that he had the right stuff, and Kissinger himself was an early Bilderberger. He wasn't a founding member, but he was an early member in the late '50s. And the Bilderberger group was sort of, I think, the place that you want to get at as far as the mothership of the World Economic Forum, as something that gets you a little bit closer, because that was set up by Prince, Bernhard of the Netherlands, a former high-level Nazi official, who was part of the ruling inner nobility. Like he's part of a family lineage that goes back, I think, probably to we're talking here 7th century or so. Not Carolingian, but Merovingian. Anyway, you've got some family bloodlines that probably even go back further than that, probably into in many cases Babylonian oligarchical castes. But all that to say, that gets you a little bit closer, because if you look at the coterie who set themselves up in 1954 around the Bilderberger group, it was sort of the think tank of think tanks, or one of the key think tanks that would be a zone, highly secretive, where participants of this broader conspiracy to undo the American Revolution, undo the Golden Renaissance, which had preceded the American Revolution, which all had within them the certain, like the U.S., what's the commonality between the U.S. Revolution and Constitution, as well as the Golden Renaissance of the 15th century Italy? The common theme is that man is made in the image of God. All human beings have souls that have thus inalienable rights embedded within us, because we have these attributes which are distinctly human, independent of what family we're born into, which gives us the ability to not only discover God's creation, But in so doing that, we discover something subjectively within ourselves, which is objectively true. So we can bridge the objective-subjective divide when we're being creative and loving. And we know ourselves more. That's what Socrates was saying when he said, know thyself. Before you're allowed to get into politics, he said to all of his students, including Plato, who made this the first rule of his academy, is you have to know geometry and know thyself. And then when you have those two things, because, as he said in the front piece of the academy, let no one who does not know geometry enter these doors. And what he meant is he didn't mean the type of geometry you and I learned in our Western schools. He was talking about spherics, astronomy, harmonics, real constructive geometry, which is based upon
how it's all
making discoveries like discover how do you construct the doubling of a square, the doubling of a triangle, the doubling of a sphere, of a cube, of a volume. How does that apply to astronomical observations? That's real. That's how geometry was developed. The crap we are given is reverse engineering bullshit that has you memorizing formulas with no knowledge, right?
And that'll be 40,000 a year, right? That'll be 40,000 a year.
So yeah, I mean that's the American Revolution. That's the Renaissance. That's what the oligarchy wants to undo.
I got it.
Yeah.
Matthew Arrett is with us. Matthew, stay right there. We're going to take a little break here and talk about a few of our products, and we'll be back. And if you care to join the show, our 800 line is open. 888-663-6386. Email Patrick, oneradionetwork.com. I think I need some water. Hang. Excuse me for that, but it has not rained here in Texas for a long time. Just want to give you a quick plug of how we do our thing here. At this point, we're just not smart enough, geeky-wise, to do all this stuff. I mean, we could do it, and I don't know. I'm just brain dead. So as long as we can continue to have your support with promoting the products that we do, you purchase them, and we make a commission on them, and it works. And if I have food and I pay my house payment, and I'm good. And so go to our website, oneradionetwork.com. You're going to see some really, really good products. So Thrival, it's a great company we've been working with for 12 years, 13 really. Pearlsium, it's a wonderful product. Brush your teeth and some calcium. The AquaCure machine, it's Brown's gas. You breathe the hydrogen. It's wonderful technology that I've been doing for 3 years now, and it'll really float your boat and help you to stay young and supple and stuff. It's AquaCure, 20% off, promo code OneRadio. An emailer sent me a message today wanting to know how often I breathe the hydrogen gas, and I told him, I go downstairs, and when I'm writing or exercising or whatever, reading, I'll breathe the hydrogen. I got to do more. And he wrote back and I said, well, how many hours? And so I just wrote back and said, hours upon hours upon, just do it. Just breathe it as much as you can, and you'll be happier. We have the organic sulfur. We have Shen Blossom, which is a wonderful company, Chinese medicine, all the, like 50-year-old ginseng. These are really top of the line people. The Relax Far infrared sauna, which is, we think it's one of the best ones ever. It is made from a medical university in Taiwan, and I guess if China doesn't take them over and crush them or something, we'll keep them doing that one. So we have a lot of, we got a lot of great products, and it's on oneradionetwork.com, and that's how we do it. People also send us some donations, and if you feel like doing that, if you don't need any products, send us $10 a month. You have a way to do that. So that's a simple way we do it here on oneradionetwork.com. So thanks for your support.
Broadcasting from the beautiful Hill Country in Texas, this is OneRadioNetwork.com.
See, Matthew, that was easy. You just tell people to go on our website and buy products. See, it works like that. That's great. We have a lot of nice products. So I guess all of us hearing you today, why would we think that it's possible that this whole energetic thing that's been building, as you say, forever, wanting to take over the world, one world government, do all the things that the World Economic Forum are talking about, why would we come to the conclusion that they're just not going to be able, they're not going to do it? It's just going to, they're going to crash and burn somewhere along the line, right? After all these years, how could that happen? I mean, would it be China, Russia, and the rest to take them on? Are they the saviors there?
Well, I think that from my standpoint, my assessments by investigating a lot of history, I'm really quite passionate about studying history, and that's why all of my books are all different, tackling different aspects of universal history. What I'm seeing as a constancy, and I mentioned that there is this common denominator amongst both the oligarchy as well as their opposing faction, those who actually do good and oppose the oligarchy successfully, is that there's two fundamentally different ways of thinking about the universe and human beings as part of the universe, made in a self-reflective image of what the universe actually is and the universe's creator. Ultimately, when you get down to it, like I said, Kissinger's religion is stasis. That's his view of the universe, is that the universe is ultimately a static universe, and that what seems to be changing within that universe of no change as normalcy is unnatural, to the degree that the things which change the most are the things that are the most unnatural. And so what changes the most when you look at, let's say, ecosystems and human activity on the earth? Ecosystems change more than non-ecosystems, right? Like rocks and non-living atoms are the least changing. Look at the moon. The moon has no signs, as far as we can tell, of any biomass, and it's a pretty boring place. There's not a lot of cycling of carbon or any type. You get activity when an asteroid hits, but otherwise it's a pretty boring place. When you look at something like a jungle, there's more cycling, more photosynthesis, more chlorophyll, more interesting motion, right? There's more creativity, more new species are coming online.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, everything is changing. But then with human beings on the scene as a sort of newer phenomenon within that process, when we're being creative and we're thinking in a loving way about the future and leaving something better for the unborn grandkids and to experience that was better than our what we had in our lives, what we're doing is we're not only making things better for ourselves but also for them. We're changing nature a lot. That's why we can have 8 billion of our species living. If we wanted to, we could be, we could have a 90+ year easy life expectancy, everybody, and have everybody living with abundance, all 8 billion people on this earth. That if we wanted to, it wouldn't be that hard to do.
Yeah,
it's just that there's political will to not do that.
Right. I agree.
So that involves this creative mentation that expresses itself in an ever-increasing array of eureka's, of discoveries of the laws of nature that were there before us, but we can discover them and then willfully change our modality in accordance with that new discovery, such that, when you discover the laws of aerodynamics, you can become now more obedient to those discovered laws, but at the same time, you have an increased freedom to fly.
Yeah.
Right. So as we choose, and this is the irony of this freedom duty paradox problem that's been, giving headaches to philosophers for thousands of years. It's not that much of a paradox. It's like when you discover something truthful through a creative act, you can then willfully obey. And obedience is seemingly the opposite of freedom, but now you're obeying laws, but you have an increased power and freedom to now do something that you couldn't do while you were ignorant of said laws.
Of those laws, of those inherent
you discover certain laws of oceanic currents. You can now all of a sudden use your knowledge of those laws to move from one side of the ocean to the other in a much more fast time than if you were trying to sail against the currents. So there's like these natural patterns in the oceans, right? Of north-south cycling that you use as a ship. That gives you a power of mobility, knowledge of electricity, same thing. So the oligarchy, they see that we are made in the image of they believe without reason, because they know ultimately that their belief is demonstrably false, which is where the lies come in. And this is what makes them kind of self-contradictory, because they have to subvert to maintain their thesis that human beings are just like any other talking cow that has to obey limits to our existence, just like the animals in the biosphere. When the rabbits, let's say you have a rainy season one season and you have more rabbits that will accommodate the increased abundance of food. Well, the next season, all of a sudden, you get a drought. What happens to the rabbits? Well, the mommies eat the babies. The baby rabbits die. They either starve to death or they get eaten by their brothers or moms. And the population levels sort of calibrate according to the scarcity of the drought-ridden ecosystem. Now, you don't put the mommy rabbits in prison or anything. You don't put them in jail for eating their kids. That's not what you do, because they're rabbits. They don't know any better. They're wired to do what they do as rabbits. Human beings, when we start eating our fellow humans, that's a problem, because we could have done otherwise, right? We had this ability to have a conscience, to think of other scenarios, to problem solve, and so we didn't have to do what we did. So the oligarchy knows that for us to become convinced that we have those same constraints that other species do, which is what people like Kissinger or any neo-Malthusian, the Club of Rome, all assert.
They want us to believe.
Yeah. Live with scarcity, live with less, eat the bugs, whatever. They know at the same time that they're sabotaging, they're killing scientists who are making pioneering discoveries. They're sabotaging lines of science that they know are fruitful, that will lead to greater abundance and discoveries. So they know that they're actually lying, that they're running contrary to the laws of nature to convince us that nature is actually something that it is not. So I think when I look at today, Russia, China, the multipolar orientation versus the unipolar basket case society that we happen to be stuck in right now. If I look at what they're doing, don't just look at what they're saying, because sometimes you'll get similar words. When I listen to sometimes words being used by leading figures like Putin or in China or even in Iran, they'll say things that are similar to the words being used by the Schwabians of the West. Like they'll say, we need a sustainable order. We need a new world economic order. They'll say things like that. They'll say, we need global cooperation. Well, everyone says that, but what are you doing, right? Is there a difference in how you're thinking about the nature of the words and their purpose that indicates a different view of human beings and the universe as a whole? Yes, very, very big difference. This is where you start. This is why in a lot of my articles, I try to map out for people, what is the new Silk Road? What are the nearly $4 trillion spent in only, a decade? On the biggest mega projects ever seen in human civilization's experience, both in Asia as well as in Africa. Like that's going on as we speak,
$4 trillion. $4 trillion.
Yeah, it's like we're at $3.6 trillion thus far.
So you're talking about infrastructure, roads, rail, all kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Like in the Belt and Road, you have it's a very flexible policy because it's not rigid. Oh, let me just my thing's getting out of focus here.
I saw you.
There we are.
There you go.
You have general macro concepts for arteries of interconnectedness with high-speed rail as a driver from east to west, but also with north to south. There's the north-south transportation corridor stretching all the way from the Arctic above St. Petersburg down all the way through the Central Asian regions, through Azerbaijan, Turkey, Iran, along the way down all the way to the coast of Iran, with branches now in ports that then connect directly into India, as well as Pakistan and China. So that's part of this developing complex of east-west corridors now that have the north-south divide. The east-west also have a north one along the maritime Component of the Silk Road that's seeing new ports, massive ports all around the Gulf states, Africa, Latin America being built. China has invested in something like 50 strategic Ibero-American ports, which is why, when they're offering development investments into Africa or Latin America, they're being embraced ardently. I mean, we're being told by, mainstream press that it's all debt trap imperial diplomacy. When you actually look at what they're doing, unlike the West, they're actually ensuring that the loans that they're providing to those countries that have been subjugated to empire for the past,
yes, sir,
200 plus years, they're actually making sure that those monies are going towards building massive infrastructure and also training cadres of engineers in Nigeria,
really?
Kenya,
Wow.
Sudan, who and we're criticizing China for saying, oh, but they're using their own Chinese workers, or they're not letting the local Congolese or Nigerian population have managerial positions in these big projects that they're building. So it's like, yeah, it's nice that they're building schools and hospitals and infrastructure, but they're not letting the locals run them. And it's like, well, first of all, the locals have been abused and destroyed. They don't have the skill sets or knowledge to run those things. But the difference is they're actually training hundreds of thousands of people in these countries to get those skill sets. They're providing, I think it's something like, what was it? I think 27,000 Africans were given free scholarships to train in the highest quality educational facilities in China to then be sent back and become the managers of tomorrow.
These guys really know what they're doing. They really know what they're doing.
It's not like they're angels. They're not doing this.
No, I understand. But so here we are in the United States and Canada with potholes, and we have governments that are just borrowing money and pissing it away. Excuse my French. I don't know. I mean, are we going to have to learn Mandarin or Russian here to survive? I mean, what are we going to do? These people are crazy that are controlling the United States. And I don't know what's going on with Trudeau in Canada. That's where you live, right? You're in Canada. So, yeah, I mean, what are we going to do, Matthew? I mean, just wait for them just to implode and then pick up the pieces?
Well, I think that we have to have, I think, on the one hand, we have to be more rigorous with our thoughts and feelings. I think that's one thing. People get a little bit too into a hysterical mode where they want just to take action without having earned, I should say, the knowledge first to animate the action, which creates a bit of a mess. And sometimes it's necessary.
That's why you do what you do, to try to help people see what's going on, so we could have a real plan, right? A real plan,
Yeah, you want people you could trust. Like, conspiracies are how history is shaped, for good or for bad. And the thing about both approaches is that they require competence and a network of people you can trust who have a similar set of thoughts and feelings.
Yes, sir.
That they have all come to, that they can put into motion. Now that could, again, if you got people with rotten, poisonous thoughts and feelings and power to put something into motion, you can get something rotten out of that. And inversely, if you get a Ben Franklin who's able to organize cadres of qualified leaders in the scientific and as well as civilian worlds to be trustworthy, they could trust each other, they could beat to the same frequency. And you could trust them to be creative, to go off on their own, right? Like you have to allow for that amount of creativity, because sometimes you're going to send people to do something and you don't have the answers. You don't know what they're going to encounter, but you have to have the sense that, okay, they have an ability to make good judgments. They have wisdom that they've earned, and you could trust that they won't backstab you and they won't misstep unnecessarily or get people in danger, because good-hearted people with soft minds can fall for a lot of traps that get a lot of people killed. Yeah. So that's, I think, one of the things that we tend to lack an appreciation of is the climb of towards the pursuit of and love of wisdom. That's the one thing. So understanding our history, understanding what Plato was saying in his dialogues, and especially like why was he saying no geometry before you start getting your mind into politics. You got to really learn how your mind moves when it's being fruitful. Learn humility, because you got to think, well, there's hypotheses you have. You might think the answers to basic things, that when you actually try to test them out, do the construction, you realize, oh, you were wrong. You, like me, that was a big humbling point for me early on when I was trying to figure things out in my early wake up days. I was into a lot of sacred geometry. I was trying to make sense of Freemasonry, but I didn't have a method. And so it was only at one point where I encountered an astronomy group, and somebody threw a challenge at me because I was talking about the golden section and its power, and the Pentagon and its power, and I had all of these opinions, and somebody threw the challenge asking me like, hey, can you build it? And I'm like, what do you mean? Can I build it? They're like, can you construct the pentagon? You're like, can you take the circle and within that circle make 5 provably equal divisions using this compass and divide that circle into 5 equal segments, which you need to do if you're going to build the pentagon. And to do that, you have to kind of know the golden section to figure out where do you make the correct incision. And I realized very quickly, I didn't actually know how to do that. And so all of the words I was using, and at first I thought I did, I just drew it. I was like, okay, here's my ruler. I'm going to draw it. And they're like, obviously you just eyeballed it. Like that's not knowledge. And I was like, you're right. So I spent weeks agonizing over how do I figure this out? And I had to realize all of these blank spots that I had in my head, that I had to fill out by making little mini discoveries along the way, so that when I finally did come up with my eureka, it was mine. I owned it. And I think a lot of people, as part of our bad education system, we were not given those opportunities because we were always told, get the right answer.
Right. Yeah.
Memorize.
What's the answer?
What's the answer? And it's like, what was the question?
Yeah.
What was the question? Like, what was Pythagoras thinking when he was trying to figure out the right angle triangle, like, and why the hypotenuse squared is the same as the addition of the two smaller sides squared? That's not obvious. What was he thinking? Let's reproduce his discovery. Let's ask his questions. Anyway,
Matthew, I have an anecdotal story about this, which to me is the most exciting thing I've done this lifetime. I just fell on the radio and somebody gave me a microphone. I just started talking, and I went to Armed Forces Radio School, and they told you how to talk, whatever. But now I've been screenwriting, learning it for 20 years, and over the last 2 or 3 years, really digging into it and just learning it. And after a while, you can really believe that you can learn this. I say this to myself. I can do this. I can figure this out. I can watch films and see how they do it. I can listen to people, how they do it. I listen to all these videos. I read books. And if you look at anything long enough and have enough passion and focus and think about it, like you're saying, and just, well, how does that work? Why does that work? Why does that angle do here? Why does why does this work when you use this word? You can figure it out, and you can figure anything out, right? I'm going to learn how to do this and make a living at it and make some good movies. I know I can do it. It might take, I don't care how long it takes, right?
Yeah.
Right? And you just keep doing it until, just like you're doing with this whole thing. It's exciting. First time I've ever really done this in my life. In school, I didn't know anything. I say, like you say, what's the answer to this? I didn't know what I was doing. Isn't that fun?
Right.
It's really exciting. Yeah,
it is. No, and I think that's where I think you get more authenticity. When like a lot of the people who have made a lot of the greatest breakthroughs in knowledge are not people who are necessarily specialized in the particular field that they made the breakthrough in.
They just dug in, right?
Yeah, like what was his name? I forget. There's a really great, I think he's Australian. I'm forgetting his name. Shoot. But he's a really great agronomist who discovered very simple and holistic techniques for greening deserts. It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, he made a point in a little speech that the greatest candle makers of Europe would not have been able to make the discovery of the light bulb. They were so hyper specialized in wax, in wick making, and they didn't have their minds flexible enough to make such a discovery of electricity and the nature of electric currents. Right. Ben Franklin had no specializations. He had a grade 3 education. He just had a heart that was tuned to wanting to make discoveries, like Da Vinci, right? Like Da Vinci was, people say, but those guys were from the past. They were the products of their age, and we're in another age now where we produce mediocrity. We don't produce people like that anymore. And it's like, wait a minute, maybe the age itself is made by people. Maybe the age is not what determines us. Maybe it's people who make the age,
I think so. Yeah.
I think when you switch it up a little bit mentally, you open up vistas of potential inside of yourself, because you're like, wow, maybe despite the fact that I'm living in a crappy mediocre age of insanity, maybe
I could do something
within myself. Exactly, I could do whatever I set my mind to. Maybe I could activate whatever type of discoveries I want in anything.
Sure. And nothing gets
and me as well. Like
Yeah, nothing. And, you know, this idea of change, I wrote myself a little note here. Can we argue then that the biggest change kind of thing that these people don't like is Matthew and Patrick and our listeners, who are souls, spiritual beings, if you will, being creative and doing stuff? This is what they keep thinking, that people don't have free will, right? I've heard some of their speeches with the number 2 dude under Klaus, and he just talks about like, no, you can't do what you want. You know, you're not spiritual beings. You're not sparks of God. You are, I don't know, you're something else. This is the real change they don't want, right?
About the Yuval Harari.
Yeah, whatever this guy. Do you ever hear that speech? He talks about that. This guy's crazy. I've
heard a lot of his speeches. Yeah, that's one of his big themes. But, you know, the irony, the self-contradiction of guys like that is that he'll still say that even though we don't have free will and there is no God and there is no reason or purpose in the universe, he's basically saying, but now there is, because we discovered this whole time that we're the gods. And by we, it's like the golden collared elites at Davos that he works for. We're the ones who are going to shape the new trajectory of evolution and natural selection as we select what type of attributes are going to be programmed into the next generations of test tube babies and computers that are supposed to become, better than human thinking machines. These people are ultimately pathetic, and when you listen to him, there's a certain like misanthropic, pitiful angst in him. This self-hating feeling that you gotta feel for the guy as a pathetic character.
They gotta be miserable. Let's do a few other random emails before we go. So this is from Victoria. Does your guest? I'm really enjoying the show. Thank you. Does your guest think that the weather is manipulated? This weather going on with all this heat doesn't make sense to me. And they're blaming it on global warming, like climate change. If you listen to NPR, the BBC, all these places, all this heat wave is climate change. This is boom, boom. Have you any evidence? I mean, I think these people can control it, but I don't know. I've never knew about the HARP and all that.
Well, yeah, like I try to approach these sorts of questions from the standpoint of I speak about what I know and what I feel like I've earned. I can speak about it, and I will say something on this, but I will also refrain from speaking about things that are too speculative that I don't know for sure.
I agree.
Now, the fact is, global warming, as we're being told, or as it's being framed as something caused by human beings and our carbon dioxide emissions, that's bunk. That's pseudoscientific crap. It's the same type of logic that has been used to create selective data sets that they put into computer models that give you the outcome that the programmers of the computer model wanted, who ignored all of the data sets that demonstrated that their outcome was wrong, that the world is actually heading towards an ice age, not global warming. We actually stopped. There's been a global warming pause back in 1999 that pause began, and it's disrupted all predictive models that had happened, that had all foreseen that we would be the ice caps would be gone by 2010.
None of that
would all be underwater. None of that happened. And so the lie there is the same lie that's being used or the same methodology being used to convince us that this pathogen, this medical emergency that's shut down civilization for 2.5 years, it has caused all of these deaths. It's just statistical data manipulation and outright lies and reframing. That's all it is.
Yes. Sir.
So I can say that's for sure. As far as ionospheric manipulation using tech like you see from HARP, that definitely exists for sure. The ionosphere, which is like 100 miles above the upper atmosphere of it's like an ionized gas, which is sort of the protective zone between intergalactic cosmic radiation and living processes on the Earth. That's what shapes El Nino. It's what shapes all climate patterns, atmospheric river systems. Like, I mean, half of the world's fresh water is not in liquid format on the Earth's surface, in seas or lakes. Most of it is actually in gaseous format in atmospheric rivers. You can see images from
So you really understand this stuff. You've looked into this. That's pretty,
I've looked into some of this stuff, And I mean, if you want to, most of it tends to be the product of evaporation over oceans. So the salt stays in the ocean, the freshwater part becomes gas that goes into the atmospheric rivers. But then it cycles directly from the ocean back, it rains down into the ocean and doesn't really participate usually in biospheric activity. Some of it does, but most of it doesn't. It's just from the ocean back into the ocean. So what we do know on a constructive level, there, just like everything, right? Everything can be a double-edged sword depending on your intention and your idea animating it. Like a hammer can build a house or kill your neighbor. Same thing. There's actually networks of very good problem solvers using this knowledge and what they've done in various ways in Australia, in the Middle East, even in Mexico. There's certain regions where they've been able to take relatively affordable antennas that are tuned to that emit a certain electromagnetic pulse into the ionosphere such that it will attract the atmospheric rivers to come inland into desert regions and cause that rain to fall into the desert to create food and other biospheric mass growth. Now that's a positive use of it.
It's pretty
and
cool.
It has been used.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Then you have the military-industrial complex side of things, which is, again, where you start looking into HARP, which was managed by, I think it still is the main contractor that manages HARP is British Aerospace, which was a company that has been behind, they had their hands all over 9/11. It's a British arms dealer, the biggest one, I think, out there, or military-industrial firm. And so they manage HARP. And I'm sure that you can create droughts. You can pull water away that would normally be raining over land masses and ensure that you could pull it away and make sure that that water now just rain over the ocean instead of over the land that it was going to rain in. Is that possibly something that's been underway in California and Texas? Possibly.
Could be.
Probably. I would say if I had that technology and I was evil, I would use it that way.
If I was an evil guy, I would do that.
Create the big type of things like... Huh? That's, you know, yeah, if I was evil, I'd
do that,
man. So, you know, there's other things. Like, I know that there's been droughts way before this technology came around. You know, if you look at the history of weather patterns, there have been devastating droughts in the 1920s that wiped out so much farmland. Thousands of people died of starvation in the United States in the late 20s and early 30s. That was without HARP technology. That was happening anyway. And I think a lot of the stuff, you got to look at astroclimatology. There are really good networks of scientists who are real scientists who are really looking at the flow of weather patterns shaped by solar activity and galactic activity, the input of intergalactic cosmic rays, which today are reducing because, oh, I think I just froze. Can you hear me?
Back. You're back.
I'm back. Okay. Like today, right now, there's an anomaly. I'm on a space weather website, and there's an anomaly where all across the Earth's surface, there's a reduction of intergalactic cosmic rays. That's also coinciding with an increased activity of sunspots. Coronal mass ejections, which also are tied to an electromagnetic field. So when that magnetic field, which is a pulsing field around the sun, reduces in activity or reduces in power, the protective zone around the Earth, right, is because it protects that magnetic field, stops interstellar cosmic rays, which are saturating our galaxy. There's cosmic rays everywhere, and there's no empty space. It's all a saturated ocean of cosmic rays you can't pick up with your eyes. But they're very active. They're integral to the process of evolution, like anti-Darwinian evolution. As evolution is actually happening, it's being shaped by these processes. It's also shaping weather systems, ice ages, things like that. And when you have lower cosmic rays coming into the lower atmosphere, you have less cloud seeding. Because we've known by the work by a Dutch scientist named Heinrich Svensmark. There's you could YouTube this video called The Cloud Mystery, which I recommend watching. And Svensmark's discovery was highly attacked by the IPCC when he made it in the early 2000s. And what he basically discovered was not, you would think, very revolutionary, but it was very revolutionary. And he basically proved that the driving force of ice ages and weather more generally is, on the one hand, cloud coverage, but there's different types of clouds. But there's a certain type of cloud, the lower ordered clouds, which reflect solar rays back into space that, you know, when you have more cloud coverage over a period of time, it gets colder, as we all know. And what seeds that, as he proved, is the cosmic ray seeding. There's an electromagnetic impulse that ionizes the air and creates a charge that attracts H2O gas molecules into nucleuses that form clouds that can accumulate into water. And so when you have more of these, the clouds caused by cosmic ray seeding, you have cooling. So today, by lack of solar, the lack of solar intensity, or the increased solar intensity, which has reduced the intensity of cosmic rays, has created less cloud coverage, which means more sun energy is entering into the atmosphere, causing increasing, again, heating. There are ways of, again, counteracting that and doing cooling things in a organic and natural way, but that's something that there's no interest in looking into, because right now all of the science and priorities in the governing stratas of the West are to kill us, not to try to solve these problems.
Yeah. Wow, so I'm going to watch that, the Cloud Mystery. I'll check that out on YouTube.
Yeah.
The Cloud
Heinrich Svensmark.
Heinrich Svensmark. What else do we have here? I got another email. Okay. So, Patrick, you talked about that you wanted to talk to Matthew about Russia and China and the reserve currency, and I had that on my list, but we didn't even get to it. I think I sent you an article. Do you know anything about the real world events going on with China, Russia, baskets of currencies, and maybe India, with trying to take on the dollar? Do we think this is in the works with some kind of? Yeah. He said, "Wait a minute. Well, that would be a big deal. I mean, that would be like a mother lode, right? I mean, that's like everything.
It's the biggest deal.
It's the biggest deal ever. Okay, before you go, you got to tell us about it. So, what have you been able to learn? What do you think they're up to? Okay,
look, what you want to do, you want to read the writings of Sergei Glaziev.
Sure, easy for you to say.
He's one of the major architects and brains behind this.
Can you spell his last name for us so we can find him?
Pardon me?
Can you spell his last name so we can find this dude? I want to learn
Glaziev. Glazyev. Sergei.
Glasy.
Yeah, Glazyev.
Okay, and he's the architect of this new China-Russia currency?
He's in large measure, it's his ideas that have been put into motion here. He's the Minister of Macroeconomic Development of the Eurasian Economic Union. He's been behind the extension of free trade deals between the Eurasian Economic Union, it's 6 major countries led by Russia and China. They got an integration that they set up in 2015 around integrating the BRI with the Eurasian Economic Union. There's another deal with Egypt currently being solidified. All of the Africa as a whole has just signed a continental free trade agreement as well, which is a vital part of this process, which is integrating more with Eurasia. The Gulf states as well, Indonesia has similar free trade agreements with them. Okay, so what is this new alternative currency? They've been de-dollarizing now for a number of years, reducing. I mean, back in 2015, I think Russian U.S. dollar holdings were something like 80% of their reserves. Today, it's down to like something 5% or something tiny. China's been doing something very similar because they see that they're holding on to not money but monopoly money, and it's worthless because they know that the U.S. is never going to pay its debts. They see that the bubble economy is going to blow.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, they've been withholding, they've been keeping us alive by trying to give us as many opportunities as possible to get back to our senses and get back to sane economics that would give value back into the US dollar. They didn't want it, and they still would rather it not melt down because it's going to hurt a lot of people, including it's going to make Eurasian lives difficult too. Which is why China has continuously bought and held up until recently, a lot of its U.S. dollar holdings, because it doesn't, and let me just restate this because people are confused by this. They don't want the U.S. to collapse, okay? If they wanted it, they would have already, dumped their U.S. holdings a decade ago if they actually wanted to subvert.
Which I think they still, I think they still own about $1 trillion of U.S. Treasury.
Yeah, that's still significant.
$1 trillion.
Like, they're at this point, they're like, no, you guys are crazy. And yeah, when you look at what they've now been they created new alternatives to SWIFT between Russia as their version, China has. They're settling a lot of their trade in local currencies, rupees, rubles, what have you. The current configuration that's being brought online, and I don't know if this is this has really hit the finish line yet. I think they're coming close, but I don't think it's done yet as a deal completely, is that the new reserve currency will not be just one currency. It's not going to be the yen or the ruble. It's going to be
a basket.
A basket of currencies, and that the currencies are ultimately tied to commodities, like real commodities that are produced in the real world, gold, silver, other things that are real, including finished goods, wheat, other things. So it's going to be an array of metrics that are tied to real measurable world action, which is the only way a capital economy can function, is if you have your monetary behavior, the behavior of the money and investments tied to reality. Unlike our world, this used to be the way we did things before Bobby Kennedy was killed. We had a more viable capitalist-based economy that was based on the creation of capital. It wasn't just based on creating fake money with gambling scenarios and unpayable debt ratios. That was different. That came out of the really mid 70s. So that's what they've got. They've got real concrete building projects. They're investing also in next generation new discoveries in every single domain you can touch, with a driving force of capital goods creation. So it's not consumer goods. There's a difference. When you think about an economy,
capital goods is what? Capital goods.
It's like machine tools, the machines that make machines, the ability to build infrastructure, the things that we can't do anymore. Consumer goods are just machines that make consumer goods. You make soap, you make TVs. Those things can be retooled to do bigger infrastructure if you retool them, but you need a lot of knowledge and skill sets to, the type of machine tool sector, we used to be able to do this in the 40s and 50s in Detroit and Philadelphia. That's why Adolf Hitler had on his wish list of strategic places in the world to bomb, Detroit was number one.
Okay.
Why? Because Detroit was the productive powerhouse of the world.
Whoa, man.
And you could cripple Russia, you could cripple China, you could cripple the Allied powers if you could just destroy Detroit. Today, look at Detroit today, right? 40 years of globalization, we did it to ourselves. We did what Hitler was talking about doing, but we self-mutilated and destroyed Detroit, because that would have been the place to retool and to build the things that used to be automotives, and you could have then built trains, rail, hydroelectric dam components, nuclear energy components could be built in that machine tool sector. So Russia and China, that's their primary priority, is building up the capital intensive industrial base, which is key. So if you have that going and you have the constant idea of improving the processes of production, then you're in a creative open system. You've broken the Malthusian trap. The Malthusian trap kicks in when you stop doing creativity and you start adapting to fixed boundary conditions that exist based. Can you still hear me, Patrick? I think I lost you.
No, I got you. I got you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, when you start adapting to limits, you start adapting to ignorance, that's when you hit the Malthusian problem where you say, I guess there are useless eaters. I get most people have become useless. So how do you justify?
This is what's going on now in the West.
They made us useless.
Yeah.
Yeah, they made us a consumer society cult of mostly useless people doing useless jobs that are not, you can't justify necessarily why a lot of these jobs are necessary. Thus, why are people necessary? And so if you can create scarcity, you can make the argument, well, if you can't justify your existence in this scarcity, I'm sorry, you're going to get the death pill. Shit like that. So the only way to get out of that is you've got to create useful people. You transform useless eaters into useful creators. And you do that by providing good quality education. You give people opportunities, and you let them find their talents and express those talents. And that's what China and Russia are doing when they're building projects in Africa or Egypt or Asia or Malaysia or Myanmar. It's very different from what we're doing.
Wow. So this fellow GLAZYEV, who kind of the architect of this, do we know what this currency is going to be called, or do you have any? No, we don't know. It's going to be something.
The name of it? No.
Yeah,
there might be something similar to a special drawing right as far as like a possible like common currency basket that each of the participating multipolar nations who have their local currencies put in. They might have like some special drawing right type thing, but the difference is that those currencies, if they go in that direction, it's still the key that makes it work is the real world basket of real commodities. That's what makes it work.
The oil, the gas, the water, whatever. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, you need a series of, maybe I think Glaziev talked about, ideally you want about 20 elements, 20 items. And each one then would have to be increasing in quality and quantity over time for the monetary flows to justify their existence. If you have more money, but you have a decrease in the production of one or more of those goods, then you're doing a problem. You can then correct. If you don't, so that's your mental metric that you're always using as a corrective measure to judge whether you're on the right trajectory or the wrong one, you know? Yeah. Whereas here in the West, we don't have any analog to the real world. And so you can have, you know, trillions of dollars made out of thin air through simply derivative commodities trading, you know, or commodities trading and then derivatives on top of that, tied to speculation. And there's nobody with the wits to say, wait a minute, the real world is decaying and the monetary thing we're celebrating is growing, and maybe we don't actually have a recovery. Maybe we're a bubble, you know?
So that's the idea behind this great reset idea, that people believe that they know that this thing can't keep going, so they're going to crash and burn it and do something else, central bank digital currency. There's something, whatever it's going to be.
Well, here's the inverse, right?
Yeah.
Both sides of the Malthusian and anti-Malthusian paradigms that are not compatible.
Right.
I've gone through what the anti-Malthusian paradigm's economic outlook is. They both recognize that the system of anything goes consumer society, neoliberal globalization is gone. Like, that was never meant to be a sustainable thing. It was designed to blow. Both sides are trying to create a new system that ties the behavior of money to real world activity. The difference is where one sees that growth is good, industrial growth, the ability to sustain people is the priority to the behavior of money. That's the one that I went through just now.
Right.
The other one says, no, we got to retie the value of capital profits and the behavior of money to the reduction of human activity on the earth. We have to tie it to we have to put value and investment incentives on the reduction of carbon emissions, the reduction of industrial goods production, the industrial of agricultural goods production, and to the degree that you conduct economic activity that destroys the ability to sustain.
That's crazy. Why life, so
you'll get more payback. You'll get more profit.
You're pinning your currency, I guess the dollar or the euro, on cutting back on everything, right? Not have as much, so they think that it's going to balance out. They think it'll balance out if there's less people and less stuff, less GDP.
They have in their mathematical models a population curve that sees the population going like this.
Oh, good.
And industrial activity going like this.
Oh, good.
As investments go like that over time, not investments, but profits go like that in their shareholder capital or stakeholder capitalism model, so that, you know, the wealth transfer to those who will own the things that no one else, that people used to formerly own but now they rent, is going to have a maximum, as those in the know who have been the investors in ESGs, you know, environmental, social, good government investment activity, are gonna make money. They'll use that money to buy up more physical goods, but the actual physical goods that they're buying, the real estate, the agricultural zones, the industrial base, are all going to have a diminishment of productivity, which is going to be what justifies their increased profit margins for those who are in their special little clubs. And it doesn't work. Like, it runs contrary. This is what gives me confidence in this whole thing, because I know that nature does the opposite. Like, God's law is a law of creativity and abundance.
Yes.
And that's provably the case. So they're trying to undo, they're declaring war on nature itself by banning CO2, which is plant food. They're trying to block out the light from the sun. That's what Bill Gates is doing, which is plant food. Like, that's how the plants eat. They're trying to undo water availability, fresh water to biomass, by a variety of ways to induce droughts, as we alluded to, right? So water, CO2, and sunlight are the three things that plants need to thrive and survive. You know, it's a blessing that human beings expel CO2 as part of our waste, which is a gift to nature, and nature gifts us back oxygen, right? All of these beautiful things, and the fact that we burn hydrocarbons for industrial use is a gift to photosynthetic plant life. It feeds them, and they love it, and we're choking, you know, nature. by creating more deserts, by planting solar panels all over deserts. That's what Ursula von der Leyen is trying to gift to Africa, is to say, let's put solar panels all over the Sahara, California and Mexico. And it's like, what do? You're going to increase the heat up to 5% on average all over these regions. 5 degrees, because you're concentrating sunlight. That will destroy any ability for life to ever grow in these regions. So they're trying to go against the flow of actual nature, and whereas the powers that are these civilizational forces, Iran, ancient civilization going back thousands of years, India, thousands of years, China, 5,000 plus years, Russia, old civilization. They're all unwilling to go along with this unnatural order of things, and they're doing the opposite, which is good. So that gives me, again, hope. And I'm hoping that, I mean, even though I do anticipate some challenges for people living here in the West ahead, I think we're going to see some bumps. Despite that, I see that there's an overarching goodness that's pulling us in a better direction. And I think we have to prepare ourselves to be the leaders, to be the teachers, communicators that we might not be at the moment, but we need to become, we need to transform into, which will involve investment of time and mind work, and, you know, organizing ourselves and organizing others in that way.
Well said. And so that's why you're ultimately positive, because if we look at the whole nature thing or God or spirit as being the opposite of what they want, that's why there's so many people out there kind of using the word God, saying that they're on God's side and God's going to win, that idea. And you hear that more and more. It's the same, similar.
It's very important.
Why not? Yeah. Well, there we have it. Man, we covered a lot of territory here, brother. Well, it was fun. Never know what to expect with you. Yeah, really enjoy this. I'll send you this video, and you can do something with it. But Matthew, thanks for coming on, and tell people about you and where they can find more of your work and support you and become a little Patreon or whatever you do.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody who wants, I guess there's a series of books that I've co-written with my wife Cynthia, called The Clash of the Two Americas. It goes through 3 volumes of U.S. history as you've never seen it, spoken from a Canadian, or told from the mind of a Canadian. From 1776 all the way till the future, and that's available on CanadianPatriot.org. The Rising Tide Foundation, we host weekly seminars, lectures. We're going to have a presentation by Cynthia on how the British recaptured the United States and what to do about that. Next Sunday, we're going to have something on the electric universe delivered by Michael Claridge, a leading scientist with the Sapphire Project up in Canada, but he's actually based in the US. He's going to do something the week afterwards. Sean Stone will do something as well after that. So we do these weekly lectures that people could you could listen in on, be part of the Q&A process every Sunday. Just email me at info@risingtidefoundation.net if you want to receive the invites. Ideally, make a donation or become a paid subscriber to our Substacks. Cynthia and myself, mattheweritt.substack.com. If you upgrade to the paid subscription, you get the invites to everything, including PDFs of the books. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff right there. If you start doing that stuff,
Plus, you're doing some videos too, right? What are these? Rumble, Benjamin Franklin, USA is an Unfinished Symphony. That's cool.
Yeah, that's the name of the first volume of our book. The USA is the Unfinished Symphony, Volume 1. And we're doing a series, maybe 10 or 20 little short history video documentaries, taking elements of those books and just bringing them into something multimedia, with a good friend of mine in Ottawa named Jason Dahl, who's this very talented producer. So he's helping to do that, and we want to try to get some traction on those. But people can watch those on my Rumble or BitChute channel or YouTube if they want to still go into that cesspool and check those out.
What kind of things does Jason produce? Jason Dahl?
Oh, documentaries. He had I met him because he was a host of a podcast called Super Spreaders, which became had a burst of activity. It became popular during the convoy thing, I think. And he invited me on to do to be interviewed, and when I said yes, he said, okay, thanks. Here's the first promotional video I just did to promote our interview. And I'm like, what? You made a promotional video? So I watched it and it was good. It was like I never saw somebody do that, first of all. And his was actually really well done. Music, background, ambient sound, very well edited. Great. And I was like, wow. And then he did another one. And then he did another one. 3 promotional videos for one interview. And I was like, whoa, you got some skill sets and some enthusiasm and a good mind. So we started talking, and he's helped make one longer video on conspiracy theories, which was the first one. It's about 23 minutes. And that worked out so well. We're going to do a whole series of those in smaller videos, going through the history research. And so we've done 3 of those smaller history videos that we want to really just get out there and help shape the zeitgeist a little bit in a way.
That's great. Is this Sean Stone Oliver's son?
Yes. Ah. Yeah, he's going to do a class in 3 weeks on the power of creativity.
The power of creativity.
On Sunday at 2 p.m. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should come on if you're bored on a Sunday.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, let me know. And so, is he doing films at all? Is he producing films too, Sean?
Oh, he's a film producer. Yeah, he's done documentaries, lots of good documentaries. He's made some live action films too. Yeah, I think documentaries is his current passion. He's a poet as well. He wears a lot of hats. He's a cool guy.
I've seen some of his videos, and his dad is like one of my heroes. Boy, he knows how to make a movie, doesn't he, Oliver Stone? No, man.
Yeah, no, he's something special for sure.
Nixon is one of my favorite movies. I don't know why I like that movie, but I've seen it about 10 times. I don't know why.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, I gotta say, I love Oliver Stone's movies. I love them.
You didn't like that one?
But Nixon, I couldn't get into it.
I don't know why. See, isn't that weird? Now, JFK, of course, was great, and the Vietnam ones were cool, and he's makes some good ones on any Sunday. Have you ever seen that one? That's a good one. Any given
that was
Sunday.
good. That was well done. Very well done.
But you didn't like the Nixon movie, huh? You didn't like that one, huh?
I couldn't put it into words. Don't ask me why. I just couldn't get into it. I found I loved his Money Never Sleeps, the Wall Street. Wall Street.
The second one. Yeah, the second one was great.
Yeah, I love the sub theme as well of the pursuit of cold fusion as they're in the backdrop, and the question of what is real value versus, which was also a theme in the first one in '89 as well. Sure. What is real value, real economic activity that's just versus the speculative rot that is Wall Street. Great moral undertone. It was good. Yeah.
And Snowden was good, right? Snowden was a good movie.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Oliver.
Natural Born Killers, not a big fan of that. But
you know what? That's so funny you mentioned that. I've watched Natural Born Killers probably 5 times, and I've never finished it. I can't. It is so weird that I can't get through it. I get about 3/4 of the way. I've never seen it to the end, to this day.
I made the mistake of watching the director's cut, a full hour of cut footage just to bring it down to the R rating, and I made the mistake back in 1999 of watching that.
Yeah.
And to this very day, my soul is scarred with
I know, that's why I can't do it.
I'm still jarred.
I can't do it. No, I can't do it. I can't do it. Did you see Oliver's Putin interviews? They were pretty good, right? Oliver Stone's Putin interviews.
Yeah, those were excellent. Yeah, Putin really appreciates Oliver, and he, I think Oliver's he did a really good thing for the West to give people a chance to actually just see Putin communicate, which you are never allowed to do ever in the Western media.
Yeah.
And his Ukraine on Fire was super powerful to this very day. If anybody still is having trouble communicating what the hell is going on in Ukraine to any friends or family, Ukraine on Fire is the most competent and entertaining documentary from 2016, I think, or 2015.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's still out there. Ukraine on Fire. So everything that finally, I keep saying finally, and I love talking to you, and everything that you know about Russia, could you ever see a time or day that you and your wife would ever live in Russia? I know you never know. Would you? I mean, could you?
Sure.
I mean, if you had to or wanted to.
Something to think about. It's just part of it is secure. I know a lot of people who have left the U.S. or Canada for obvious reasons in the last year and a half or so, and a lot of them are in a tough spot as well because you're now hopping around different parts of the world trying to find some security. You didn't plan out a job or anything like that, and so you're trying to figure out what do you do when you get from point A to point B, or where's point C going to be? part of it is we have a lot of people who follow our work, who communicate with us, who tell us that we provide them also a lot of hope. And I feel a little bit weird leaving when there's so many fellow citizens. We're all, there's so many of us who are all in this together. It's nothing personal,
Yeah.
So we're so far sticking with the bunking down here in Canada. We got a little house, and we're gonna.
As you probably know, there's quite a bit of chatter, and I mean real serious talk. Places like where I live, Texas and Florida, Oklahoma. We interviewed a fellow who ran for governor in Oklahoma, and the word succession is not an evil word anymore. I mean, it's going around, and it could happen. Florida, Texas, Tennessee.
Yeah.
They could just say, you know what, we're done. We're done.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing with me. It's a difficult one to talk about because I want my priority right now is the best of all possible worlds. Right, the best scenario possible is recapturing the federal government.
Really?
Yeah, I mean that's the best scenario is preserving the union. Obviously, the idea of going into a civil war is a real scenario. I don't think that the technocrats managing Biden would acquiesce peacefully to a secession process. I think it would probably
be ugly,
very violent. Yeah. A lot of death, a lot of bad would happen. And so the greatest good possible would be to preserve the union, restore its constitutional traditions, and over the course of, it's going to take decades of healing to start undoing the damage we did to ourselves psycho-spiritually, physically. But that's where my priorities are focused right now.
Oh, good for you. You're a real idealist, boy. I'll tell you what.
I mean, otherwise, the other scenarios get really messy. And I'm not intrinsically against the idea of secession. If a secession is done, it's like the U.S. seceded from the British Empire. If it's done in a principled reason, it's like in Quebec, I live in Quebec. There are bad reasons to secede from the federal government, and there's good reasons. And there's people who want to break away and become a republic, or not a republic, but their own Quebec country for bad reasons, just because they have their own, they just want to speak the French language, and that's their whole identity is just the French language. They don't care about economic justice, like actual giving people real jobs or anything like that. So it's really just uninspired, limited, and they really just want to be another tool within the Great Reset. Sure. But they would just want to have a bit more independence, being a tool in the Great Reset. And then other people have historically, there are traditions that want to, secede and set up a real republic founded upon principles of natural law. And if that were done, then I support it. I support that one because I don't think Canada is a legit country. It's been totally captured by an oligarch.
Who knows what it? And there's some real good things you could do in a state where you had your own bank that wasn't a Federal Reserve kind of bank, a real bank, and you could support a lot of people with a real. And
it could be a role model for other states and other nations to do something. If you could be a success and demonstrate what competency is on a local level and on a state level, or maybe a multitude of states getting together with a common principle, that could grow in a I think a lawful way. But the part of it that I find I have trepidation with is the divide to conquer part, because I know that the oligarchy does get its benefit by breaking up its victims into divided local zones, mini regions, and that are thus more easy to snip off, crush when you're small, but when you're unified, you're harder to crush. So would it be easier to crush a local state or a couple of breakaway states over something bigger as a nation? Yeah, I think it would be easier. But at the same measure, if you've got leadership that's qualified and competent in affecting policy, like the early U.S. colony had real leadership 250 years ago, you can do it. But I don't know. I don't see a lot of, I guess, displays of that quality of statecraft, of competency, of that order that I crave. Mm-hmm. Like who? I want to see more competency, is I guess what I'm saying.
Sure, yeah. I met a fellow at the farmer's market this morning who just returned from Sri Lanka, and I asked him about the revolution there, and he said, what you're seeing on videos are nothing like what went on. He said there were millions of people in the street, and they just stormed the castle. They just took, So I said, well, who's in government now? He said, well, the parliament just appointed somebody else, and it's the same old, same old. God love them. Can you imagine going through all that, and all of a sudden they just put up some other doofus? I don't know how you deal with that.
Well, that's why I'm saying you need competency, because just the people by themselves, you get the sans-culottes, that's the problem with the French Revolution. That's why the French Revolution turned into a useless bloodbath that created a vacuum of leadership when they killed everybody who had qualifications, like some people were corrupt. Many people were corrupt who got their heads cut off, but a lot of people who got their heads cut off were actually really good scientists and statesmen. Yeah. And it was such just a rage fest of just people who had been abused, who then became mobs, and mobs are just the flip side of tyranny, because they're always used by demagogues like a Robespierre or a Danton, who could then move the mob, the unthinking mob, because you think less when you're in a mob. You get herd think, right? And you could use them as battering rams, weapons against the state, which is what was done to the case of France. And they had like a Republican-minded king. Like, you don't get those very often, who actually cared about the people, who wanted to help the American, who put vast resources into supporting George Washington and the American cause earlier. He wanted to really do some seriously good reforms and take down the oligarchy in so many levels in France. And they ended up cutting off his head and his wife's head.
I had one.
So then they were left with what, a proto-fascist Napoleon who just burned the earth for 20 years trying to declare himself a world emperor. So you need to have, again, the types of Ben Franklins. You need to have the Hamiltons, the Washington. Like, you have to have people who've been through the fire, worked on themselves, to be able to. I think Trump has exhibited qualities of sophistication that were unexpected. He's also, said dumb things as well, especially on the vaccine issue that I'm terribly disappointed with. That being said, and I want to put this video on YouTube, so I'm not going to say more about that. Yeah. But
don't do that. Take the V word out. Just take the V word out.
No. Just said the word. I did say anything about it. I'm not judging. Not casting judgment. Not casting judgment. But he definitely has power structures that are evil, that he had to negotiate with, work with, try to stay alive, knowing that they couldn't. They were there. I think a lot of these fifth columns are embedded in a lot of countries that find leaders who find themselves, for reasons I don't fully understand, they feel like they need to negotiate with these structures. That one is one of the big ones. Again, I have indirect mappings of it in my mind, but there's things I don't understand because I'm not on the inside. I don't have any power of anything. So
if the conservatives can do, if they can get in this. Yeah, if the conservatives can get in and just slow this whole thing down in November, just slow it down, all these crazy stuff they're doing, maybe we can survive. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, the blowout's going to happen. You need to have like a discussion around, restoring Glass-Steagall before the blowout. After the blowout, forget it. It's too late. You got to make sure that the controlled demolition of the banking system hits the banks and not the people. That's what Glass-Steagall does. So you got to get a discussion around breaking up the banks between the crap, toxic waste, speculative component and the real commercial banking that's useful to your society. Get that.
Oh, so you're talking about just taking over the Fed and getting rid of the whole separation between the Fed and the Treasury.
Well, the Fed's got to be converted into either dissolved or converted into a real national bank. The Glass-Steagall Act would be a part of that package of directing the blowout of the system onto the speculators who gambled and lost, getting rid of the too big to fail model, meaning no bailouts, meaning you fail, meaning at that point you trigger the system blow up, because when you admit that the banks have failed, these too big to fails, you got a system collapse. And now the question is, well, do we protect the real, there's 5,000 viable solvent commercial banks that could be very useful as instruments of growth, that could be outlets to take funds from a real national bank, like Lincoln Greenback's style, and provide those funds for investments into entrepreneurship, in infrastructure development, things like the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, right? For North America, the opening up of the Arctic with the Polar Silk Road. That's something that Russia is doing. They're building 5 advanced science cities in the Arctic, each one which will house 1 million people each, with high-speed rail integration. That's going on. So we could have something similar in Alaska and Yukon. that would be a good driver for a real industrial renaissance. So, and it would also avoid war, to pull the tension out of the militarization of the Arctic strategy, which is currently where things are moving anyway, for a war in the Arctic. Instead, well, let's actually develop the resources that are abundant in the Arctic and have some, forward-thinking economic investments around that too, as Russia and China become increasingly, collaborators and friends in mutual development instead of being our opponents. So those are the sorts of constructive things that could animate, I think, a national policy discussion fast, because we're running out of time.
Well, it's going to be interesting looking forward here to see what happens. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Mr. Ehret. We really appreciate it. And we'll put all of Matthew's different links to his 120 places you can go to visit him in the show page, so you can just click on him and visit him and support him and send him some money too. Matthew, thanks a lot. Love your work. We appreciate it. You take care of yourself, okay?
Patrick, always a pleasure. Take care of
Stay
yourself
out of
too.
trouble. Bye-bye. Matthew Ehret,
Bye.
Patrick Timpone, OneRadioNetwork.com. Boy, he's fun, huh? I just love talking to people who actually think for a living, It's like, whoa. I mean, come on. Yep. Okay, so what are we going to do? I don't know. I think we'll just take a break, and we'll see you in the morning. We're going to talk about money. We'll talk about China, Russia, the dollar, the reserve currency, of like we did with China and Russia with Matthew. This is happening, and it's a big deal. With someone who will know a lot about it as well. His name is Jim Rogers. He'll be here 9 o'clock tomorrow morning on One Radio Network. 9 o'clock. We're starting early because Jimmy Rogers is in Singapore, and there's 13-hour difference. So that would be excuse me, I need more water. It'll be 10 o'clock his time. I love you all. Thanks for your support. Go on our website. If you need something, buy it, and that'll be great. I love you. We'll see you tomorrow, 9 o'clock Central Time. Let me know if I can help you.
Broadcasting from the beautiful Hill Country in Texas, this is OneRadioNetwork.com.